And welcome to week 2 of English 210, Introduction to Literature. We're excited that you've decided to stay in this course and we're hoping that you are enjoying the class so far. This week, obviously, you want to go ahead and read this week's announcement, then click on Content. After you click on Content, launch the unit, and you'll get into the week 2 short fiction and the writing process. This week, basically what you're going to be focusing on mainly is writing an essay. And so the lesson this week will show you how to write a short story essay. So this week, the readings will be similar to the ones last week. You see you have these short fiction stories. Well, this week you do have the same stories. However, you're going to be assigned one of these stories to focus on in your essay. So make sure to take the short story quiz, and that will assign you what story you need to focus on. There are also a couple of works that explain how to write a short story. This will give you an introduction to literary criticism. That's something that we're going to focus more on next week, but this is just going to give you a little taste of what literary criticism is. And then you also want to read Harold Bloom's information about how to write a good essay. It's very helpful and factual, and hopefully it will give you some information, some good information on how to write the essay this week. So let's start going through some of the information in the lessons. So basically this week, what you're going to do is you're going to read through the lesson and get some ideas about how to approach your essay. I want to go back one. Okay, so this week there is a video in there that's called the short story essay. I want you to watch it. We all want you to watch it. The reason why is because it gives you an idea of how to approach this essay. Many of you have taken English 110 or English 101 or even one of the college courses. However, this essay will be a little bit different in that, yes, you have an introduction, yes, you have a conclusion and a thesis statement, but the difference is your thesis statement will be focusing on the story's theme. So basically, what you're going to focus on is what you think the moral of your chosen story is. The reason why the reader reads the story, the purpose behind the story, basically what we learn from reading that story. You decide what is important about that story, and then you prove that thesis based on the theme through your discussion using specific points of the story to prove your discussion. This explains it more in detail and what the thesis should look like, but note, we do not want a plot overview with this. Now next week, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about literary criticism, but I want to have a little bit of an introduction to it first. So this week, there are various ways that you can interpret a short story, a play, a novel, what have you. And think of a pair of eyeglasses. You have sunglasses with, let's say, a little bit of red tint. Well, then when you go outside or inside, you see things with a little bit of a haze, right? A little bit of a red tint. The same holds true for sunglasses with a darker tint. Things are a little bit darker. Think of that as a critical lens. When you look at a certain work, you're using that certain style to interpret a work. We're going to go more in depth with that this week, but basically you're using history to interpret a work, you're using the author's biography to interpret a work, and so on and so forth. But this week you're going to use new criticism. New criticism is the way to interpret a work that you're probably most familiar with. You are giving me or your professor the meaning behind the work, a basic reason for its existence. Why do we read this work? What are we supposed to get out of this work, basically? That is what new criticism is, and that's what we're going to focus on this week. Now, there is a sample essay that's loaded in this week's lesson. It is based upon a work that some of you might be assigned this week. It's called The Purloined Letter. This is using new criticism, which is basically what you'll be using this week, basically letting us know the purpose behind this short story. Now, obviously, this article will be a little more complicated and much longer than what you're going to be writing this week, but hopefully it gives you a basic idea of what we're expecting for this first essay. Also, the lesson goes into some depth about summary sites. In a nutshell, using one of these sources basically hands you the plot and the purpose behind the work on a silver platter. What's wrong with this? Well, it is telling you what it thinks the story means. There is not one way to interpret a work, though. There is not one way to interpret a work. The purpose behind the essay is, of course, to show your writing skills, but also to show your instructor that you have the ability to interpret yourself, that your interpretation matters just as much as Spark Notes and, oh my goodness, Course Hero, horrible site. Your interpretation matters. You have the ability to think critically about a work. And when I say critically, I don't mean criticize. What I mean is you go beneath the surface trying to figure out what the point is behind the work. You have that ability. There is no right or wrong answers with your interpretation. As long as you can prove how you feel using text from the work, your interpretation is valid. So don't let these sources tell you what to think. You think for yourself. Got that? All right, so there's some tips for citing works. It's pretty easy, just follow that. These are obviously MLA style, and also don't forget to introduce your quotes, and that is discussed in this section. All right, that's about it. Now let's get to the activities. First, you have a week 2 and 3 classroom project. This is not something you should stress about at all. One of your classmates, perhaps you, is going to upload a prompt at the beginning of the week. Then the rest of your classmates are going to upload a follow-up to that prompt. It is a short story. So you are going to use some creativity and you're going to contribute to this short story. I don't care if it's silly. We don't care if it's thrilling. We don't care if it's scary. We don't care if it's romantic. It doesn't matter. It's just an opportunity for you to get to know your classmates, come together as a class, but your grade will be based upon your work, not someone else's. And as long as you're a little creative and you complete the assignment, you're going to do well. Finally, you need to take the short story quiz. Just click on the instructions. It's going to assign you a short story. You should be able to go back and look at it, but if you can't find the assigned short story, ask your instructor and he or she will be able to find it for you. Finally, you have a short fiction essay due this week. It's due at the end of the week, due on Sunday at midnight. Make sure your interpretation is at least 500 words, and this does not include the formatting or the works cited list, but make sure it's no more than 750 words. If you find yourself going over than that, you need to tighten up your essay or limit your thesis even more. As mentioned before, avoid all summary sites. Please, please, please. Use MLA format. Make sure your essay has a clear intro and a thesis statement. Make sure your body paragraphs focus on the thesis statement, the theme, the point of the story, and not on plot summary. Do not summarize a story. Your instructors have read the story. They don't need you to restate it. And then make sure to use literary present tense. What does literary present tense mean? Well, it means that you are talking about the story as though it still exists. And it does, right? So instead of saying Poe wrote, you say Poe writes. Or, for example, let's say you're writing about the story of an hour. Mrs. Mallard dies, not Mrs. Mallard died, right? Because everything is in the present because the short story still exists. So when we write about fiction, we write in the present tense. If you have questions about that, please let your instructor know. I know that your instructor, your professor will be more than happy to help you with this. All right, That's the end of the unit. Hopefully this video helped you. If not, please ask your instructor, send an email, message, or post in the open forum. We are very much looking forward to reading your short story essays and your contributions to the short story discussion this week. Have a great week, everyone.